Hey everyone, welcome back. Brand new Take Aim podcast. And wow, what a crazy couple days. We've had opening day of gun start or firearm season for a lot of states, including like Missouri, Indiana. Here in my home state of Michigan started actually today. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an awesome bow kill out in Iowa with my good buddy Curt Headington, the vice president, Expedition Archery. Curt's been after an awesome buck out in Iowa called Turkeyfoot for the last few years. And what a story about this Turkeyfoot. What a deer. And just, man, what a season for Curt Headington. He killed 2 Booners, tagged out in Iowa in the same season. So great story. There's a lot to this deer and to the story and how Curt hunted him and hunted his home farm. So there's definitely a lot to take away from this, a lot to learn. So as always, I hope you guys enjoy. If you're out there gun hunting, be safe and best of luck. We'll see you guys soon. All right, guys, we are live, brand new Take Aim, and excited to be back. We're right in the middle of the rut. It's mid-November, and excited to have my good buddy back on, Curt Headington from Expedition Archery. What's happening, Curt?
How you doing, Brandon? Thanks for having me.
Man, super excited to talk to you, man. I know you just put the hammer down on a giant buck in Iowa, and to go along with just a gorgeous, giant, super mature deer. Man, you got a heck of a story, Curt, and I can't wait to hear it all.
I just, I'm still kind of on cloud nine, Brandon. I mean, every year, we kind of go through the same routine on, which deer made it, which sheds do we have, who are we targeting, and then, everyone's like a kid at Christmas waiting for the first pictures and say, late July or something to know who you got. And this year was no exception. I mean, we went into the year with a hit list, and honestly, my top 3, 2 of the 3 bucks on that list are the 2 bucks we're going to discuss today. So obviously, very blessed to live where I live. The opportunity here is incredible. But yeah, to have 2 stories like that with deer that caliber and that age structure, when it comes together, I don't know what else to say about it other than I just, I truly do feel very blessed and fortunate. So kind of a dream team.
I mean, yeah, for sure it is. Well, let's start kind of at the beginning a little bit, Curt. Like, where and what time was this deer that you had called Turkeyfoot that you killed yesterday? But time did you kind of notice him and the other deer you were talking about, and you're like, man, these are 2 deer we're going to put on the hit list now, or was it like we're going to put them on the hit list, immediately next?
Realistically, Brandon, it was we expected to have them, right? Because we had numerous encounters last year, and I work hand in hand with my one neighbor. He's big into deer management. So we share pictures, we talk openly. Our goals are, 100% lockstep. And in either case, this deer almost lived exclusively on his farm. And I mean, even though I can throw a rock into it from multiple locations on my farm, that deer was like a recluse, man. I'm telling you, he lived, if I told you 90% of his life was confined to about 100 acres, I'm not stretching. Like it was... He had a valley that he loved. He had a high spot in the valley where he bedded. We even have a mineral site, or my buddy's got a mineral site right there, and he'd get him every day, like at all times of the day. 11:30, right. 2:30. That deer was bedding right there. So it wasn't really a matter of, hey, let's get him on the hit list. It's we knew about him. We've known about him for 2-3 years, and we've watched him progress. And the expectation was that he was going to be there. And sure enough, by mid-July when the antler growth is there, we knew he'd put a nice jump on, 15, 20-inch jump, and he for sure was going to be, like I said.
Top 3, what were the other 2 deer besides Turkeyfoot?
Yeah, so going into the season, on that farm in particular, 2 of my top 3 bucks existed, and the number 1 deer actually got taken by a 15-year-old kid, kind of a neat story, to about a half mile south of us, and they'd put a green field in, And that deer, of course, wandered over there, and Will was fortunate enough to take him back on, I believe it was October 8th. I honestly, I hadn't even started hunting him because he hadn't been active on my cameras in velvet. Like, we were getting some pictures of him on the neighbors, and like I said, this is maybe half a mile from my farm. He got shot, but he was 190 inches. He was an absolute stud. So that was cool. I went over and measured the deer for the young man and actually gave him the match set from last year because I had picked up his match set in one of my food plots. Golly, back in probably late February or early March, I found them. So that was number one. And then number two is Turkeyfoot, the buck I was just lucky enough to harvest. And then the number three buck was the one that I shot October, 23rd, I think. So that was my top three going into the year. And interestingly, my first one actually scores better than Turkeyfoot, but as far as history and age structure and whatnot, Turkeyfoot was number two only because the one the neighbor killed was just an absolute slob. I mean, like I said, 190 inch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy big. So
two out of three on the hit list. I was pretty excited. So
yeah, that's amazing season. I mean, right off the bat, that's kind of insane to think that out of your top three bucks, you killed two of them, and now I know we were talking like offline, like you're done, you're tagged out, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's not that I haven't tagged out during archery season with two archery bucks. I've dang sure never done it with two gross Boone and Crockett animals. So
right.
Yeah, super blessed, lucky, whatever you want to call it. I'm excited. It's arguably the best season of my hunting career.
Yeah. And what's crazy, Curt, is we were talking about this. This season by all means has not been easy for anybody and everybody. Especially if you're here in the Midwest, we got an unexpected warm front. Highs in the 70s. You had it, Curt. I had it up here in Michigan. So kind of let's get into that, Curt. Like, I know you're ramping up and you're ready to go and kind of, trying to take the direction to get on to Turkeyfoot, and this warm front happened. So how did you kind of combat that? And did you do anything differently or just kind of stayed the path on what you thought he would be doing and kept grinding it out?
It's funny because it was like an internal struggle. And all I mean by that, Brandon, so Turkeyfoot physically showed up on one of my cell cams early in the morning of November 1st. So like he hit a big primary scrape, and it's actually where I had a lot of pictures of him last year. So I had anticipated the same behavior, but last year he didn't show up on my cameras until about now. I think it was the 11th or the 13th, so it was a little bit later in November last year. And I think it was just probably more like the passing of the guard or the age structure. Maybe this year he was the guy or, the most mature buck. I'm not sure. What I can tell you definitively is, like I said, when that camera went off on November 1st, and it went off twice, like he came through at, I'd have to look, but if I said 3 o'clock in the morning and hit that scrape, and then he was there right at daybreak, like right at, 6:15, 6:20, hitting that scrape, I immediately went in there that evening, and that evening I seen him. He was dogging some does. But I got a good look at him. I had glass on him for, probably 30 minutes combined because he was in and out of the woods into the open field, chasing a couple does. And I just never got a crack at him that night, but it obviously validated he's here. He's walking daylight. He's chasing does. And I do have a ridiculous concentration of does just because of the bedding that we've created and it's just perfect structure, and of course I got a lot of food on these farms. But it was nuts because that night, the night of the first, when I first seen him this year, it was the last decently cool day. I think it was like 50 or 51 that day, high pressure. It was like a perfect hunt day. But yeah, starting on the second, our daytime highs were rolling well into the low 70s. So to be like distraught, I'm not going to lie. Like, I thought it was going to ruin my window or my opportunity to get on that deer. And literally over the next 6 days, I hunted that deer almost morning and night. I couldn't bring myself to sit all day when it was 70 degrees, because it did. It certainly suppressed daylight movement. But it did seem like that last, hour to 2 hours, or first hour to 2 hours in the morning and the last in the evening, I was still seeing really good movement. But yeah, so over the course of the next 6 days, I had 4 encounters with that buck, and obviously the fourth one resulted in him getting a trip to my taxidermist.
So that core area that you're hunting him in, Curt, explain some of that and how you went about, like, how'd you pick your morning spots versus the evening, or was it, what were you doing stuff based on food, cover, bed, or just wind direction? What was your plan?
It was mostly wind direction, and the reason I say that, Brandon, is you'd have to see this to really understand it, but like, our terrain's pretty rough here. There's a lot of contour and a lot of elevation change just between like a coulee or like a valley in the top. I mean, it might change literally a couple 100 feet, and in a lot of cases it's sharp. Like, the valley this deer lived in is L-shaped, and if you're thinking like the short side of the L, that is me, that is my farm, and then the long side of the L, that valley, it all connects, it's all hooked together. But that's my neighbor, the buddy I was just saying that I share all the information with. That deer's core area, I'm saying I'm on the fringe of it. My buddy Jim, for sure, that deer lived there. So as soon as he started, extending his range a little or moving into rut mode, he started coming further down the valley, and the amount of scrapes and rubs and whatnot in this little section of the valley that leads up to me is incredible. So just to give you a visual, in the bottom of this valley, there's a spring-fed creek, so it's always cooler down there. And then that creek runs out and adjoins to a 3-acre food plot I put in every year. And this year it's a mix. I have a perimeter of corn, and then the entire probably 2-acre center of it soybeans. And I have ridge on both sides above this food plot. So based on the history and the pictures from the past of Turkeyfoot and some of the encounters I've had in the past, I had a pretty good idea how he would move through there. So literally back in the spring, because of him and because of the 5x6 the neighbor took, last year those deer were doing almost the exact same thing, and they were just coexisting on the farm as 4, maybe 5-year-old deer. And so I reconfigured how I was hunting it in the spring, just basically setting up for those 2 deer, expecting to have them. So I was more focused on the wind and making sure I wasn't putting my wind where I was expecting him to come from. But as far as morning versus evening, this place I can go virtually any of these stands. I could go either or and see good movement. The only limiting factor is because it's tucked up to, I shouldn't say tucked up, but like adjacent to some of my food, it's a little tricky some days getting in there in the morning. I mean, I really tiptoe and move slow and sneak in, I guess. But like the top side above this L that I was just describing is a cut cornfield. It's an actual ag field, and obviously the deer use that a lot too. So it's just one of those deals. Like if I felt like, I heard deer moving around when I'm walking in there, I'll pop into a stand just to get in. I won't encroach. But like if I'm moving along nice and slow, and of course it was basically a full moon right about the same time he showed up on me. So like when I'm walking in, I will literally glass my bean plot. I will glass my corn plot, because it does seem like at night, regardless, those deer will let you get close, but not too close, right?
Right. It's that like 50-yard, 40-yard marker, it seems to be.
And I think, at least my experience would say, it's more the noise. Like if you just go crunching in there, you will blow them out. But if you move slow and even attempt to move more like a deer, right? They'll take 5 steps, pause, 6 steps, pause. So I'm pretty religious about that, and I have multiple times when I've walked, for sure, 60, 70, 80 yards away from deer in a cut cornfield in the dark. You just got to move slow, and you got to have the wind in your favor. So.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and that's for sure you can do that too. Now, Curt, when you say that valley, I just want to explain to everybody, that means usually for you guys in your part of the country, that valley is loaded with timber, correct? So
if you want a visual, Brandon, just think of a deep cut, right? We're talking an oversized ditch basically, but I would guess I'm gaining on my end of this cut, this valley. I bet I gained 50 foot of elevation to the ridges above the valley, and the ridges are heavily timbered, but they are fairly steep. Not that deer couldn't go up and down them. They just choose. There's only a few paths they take, right? But yeah, to explain it, the ridges are timbered, and then, like I said, the bottom is fairly open where I have my food plot. But then right adjacent to that in the bottom of the valley, it is the thickest, nastiest stuff you've ever seen. Yes.
Okay. Well, good deal. So you have food plot, you have stands for both kind of morning, evening sets, so to speak. So from there, Curt, what you said wind direction mostly, but did you, based on that theory, which I totally agree with, you got to do the best you can with that wind direction. What were you noticing from some of the sets you were in?
The interesting thing was we were dealing with, a straight south or maybe even a little bit of a southwest almost the entire time I pursued him. So this little 3-acre food plot, Brandon, I literally have, now that I'm thinking about it, it's 5 tree stands all within, give or take 200 yards of each other, all for different reasons. Okay. And that was probably part of my success is I was able, although I was in the same general area, I didn't have to put all of my pressure every time in, say one stand.
Right, that's right.
The whole thing, I kept learning stuff. So like the first night I seen him, and the ridge I seen him on is adjacent to mine, but it's like the bottom, and it's fairly open where he was running this doe. So if that was Monday, I sat him again on Tuesday evening. Tuesday evening, I seen him. So then Wednesday morning, I went in there, and I actually hung a new set where I'd seen him Monday night. And then, long story short, I had 2 other encounters with him out of the scrape stand that I told you guys about where I was getting the pictures, and in both cases he came into the bottom scent checking, but he came from different directions both days. So that was a little unique to me. So I switched gears, went on the other side and like sat the creek side of my food plot, and then I seen him up on the ridge that I had been sitting. So it was like a chess game. And then I moved to that new tree stand where I sat, expecting him to come from the left, like for him to work down that ridge with the wind in his face, and he actually walked out with the wind at his back to my right or south of me, which was fine, but that was a brand new set. I didn't get real crazy trimming, limbs and stuff out. I actually had to let him walk by at like 25 to 35 yards because I didn't have a shot. Like I had some limbs in my way. So when I ended up shooting him, he was right at 45 yards quartering away.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
So it was just bizarre because, normally I'm a weirdo and I will not pressure a stand or an area. Like, I got tree stands that may only get sat twice a year, but knowing that deer's routine wasn't changing and I was in there hunting him, I just stayed the course. So I did, I moved to the spot I thought would put my odds in my favor every time. And almost every time I did see him or get an opportunity at him, but he didn't do what I thought he was going to do. So it was an interesting 6 days of cat and mouse or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, talk about being all over one. I was literally all over him. I mean, like I said, in 6 days we had 4 encounters.
Yeah, that's a lot.
For a mature buck, I just think his core range had been whittled down so hard. Like, he's not a deer that's going to move out 2 miles to look for does. I think all of his rutting was going to happen in that valley, regardless. And based on his body condition, I mean, he for sure declined heavily from a body perspective. His horns made a nice jump, but Brandon, when I got this deer on the ground, he may have been, 170 pounds, which here is an absolutely tiny, tiny buck.
That is.
So I'm gonna get him
not
aged.
Normal for you guys.
No, I mean, I would argue, a 250-pound deer is probably normal for a nice buck, a bigger buck.
Right. One thing I think that's important to kind of touch on, Curt, is basically what you just said, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. Based on his core area, and you said that really had shrunk, a lot of that, and we just spoke of this maybe 2 weeks ago with Mark Luster on the podcast, but do you believe, Curt, that happens with their age as they get that older, that they're like, you know what, I'm not going to expend that energy outside of my core range, and I'm up and a little more active during daylight. Again, because of my age, I'm not really capable anymore of pushing around, that 3-year-old that's 150, 60 inches. So they're up and kind of looking for does a little more. So, I mean, is that something you've noticed or thought of?
It is, and what's so hard, I mean, there's literally only a handful of guys in the entire country that can speak with confidence about, like, ultra mature, literally mature deer, and you've had a lot of them on. I mean, whether it's Lee Lakosky or Mark Drury, Mark Luster, I know, had an incredible career deer hunting, Greg Lessinger, guys like that have so much history with literally just hunting mature deer, right? I mean, I would make the argument even here, most guys don't get the opportunity to hunt a lot of deer that are over 4 years old just because there isn't a lot of them in existence, right? They get big and they die when they're 3, they die when they're 4. So, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, in my experience, and by no means am I putting, myself in the caliber of hunter I just rattled off, but, like, in my experience, I think the doe, like your doe structure, I think has as much to do with a core range of a big buck as any. And all I mean by that is the first night I seen him courting that doe on the first, no exaggeration, the doe's body was bigger than his. And I don't know this isn't factual, this is my opinion. I think those big matriarch does pick out the buck they're going to breed with regardless, and I think they have something to do with how far or, how tight that buck's going to stay, just from an age structure perspective, during the rut. I mean, I think as all bucks' core areas get smaller as they get older because I think they just stay in places they know they're safe, and they've been safe for 5-6 years of their life. But they definitely, once that core shrinks, I feel like they become more visible. Like that they're more apt to daylight walk and stuff in their little core area as they get older. That phase between like 4 and 5, in my opinion, is when a lot of bucks kind of go off the radar because they're so nocturnal. I think once they get 5 plus, in a lot of cases, I think not that they're letting their guard down. I think they just have such a sense of security
That's right.
that they start doing bizarre stuff. I mean, like Turkeyfoot, as an example, 4 days leading up to when he showed up on my camera, my buddy on the adjoining farm, he had him daylight walking at 9:30, 11:30, 2:30. that deer was up in broad daylight moving around, hitting scrapes and laying down signs. So I think it's just one of them deals, like every deer is different. They're all unique. They all have their own personality. But him for sure, like he wasn't a very aggressive buck, and I think it's because he was so little. Like he just,
right.
He's not going to push around a 3-year-old 8-pointer. He's just not. But I don't think he has to, because I think those does are there and they're going to breed with him. Like maybe that sounds weird, but I think it goes both ways. I think those super mature does stand and wait for the super mature buck, or like maybe even go to him. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's weird, Curt. I've always thought this and wondered. We can't identify a lot of does, right? So that makes it hard for us, but I wonder what we would learn if we could identify them a little bit better. But I've always wondered if that's based on age a little bit, like those does and like Turkeyfoot, like, there's does that are 5 and 6 years old, so they've known each other and had that relationship for years and years is what I'm getting at. So I've always wondered if that comes into play. It's just that relationship of growing up in the same area.
I gotta believe it does. And to your point, I mean, it's outside of having a doe with some unique feature or marking or something where you can definitively ID them. I'm just going based strictly on what they look like. And I mean, when them does, it looks like their head's 2 foot long and their sway back, their pot belly. I mean, they look just like a buck.
Right.
I gotta believe they're old. And I mean, even though we actively, shoot does on these farms for management purposes, inevitably, I would guess every year I have a handful of does with that kind of age structure. The same age structure we're targeting the big bucks with.
Right.
I think it just happens by default. So.
Yeah, for sure it does. And like you said, I think it does have some play into that breeding, and again, we don't obviously know just based on IDing them, but man, I'm telling you, if there was a way they had colored tails or something like that, we would be like, holy cow, like look at what we've learned from these does.
Well, and I guess the other thing I would add to this, this conversation is, I would argue the doe's home range may even be tighter than a lot of bucks' core areas. I mean, I know for a fact that we've had years where like a doe will have triplets, and every night, I mean, she's more programmed than any buck I've ever seen. They're in the green field, then they go to the cornfield, and you know exactly where they're going to leave the ridge or where they're walking onto the ridge. I think some of those does, heck, I don't know that they veer, out of about a 20-acre radius when they have their fawns because they're so protective over them fawns. I think it's the same phenomenon. We just don't talk about it because no one really cares. You know what I mean? Like, we care because we're curious, but no one's like, oh, I just shot the biggest doe in the state of Iowa. Like, no one's ever said that.
Right, No, but it is true. I've noticed a million times that I have bumped does out of an area with fawns or whatnot, and the next time I go in there on the right wind, guess who's back? It's got to be that doe and fawn again. But they're so good in their mind of like, hey, that worked. I got away. I'm coming right back here. I am completely safe. And they, like you said, are so programmed. They utilize it to a T, and it's about survival, and they're great at it.
Well, and I think, you start fast forwarding or rewinding, however you want to look at it, like through the years, does always kind of congregate into like family groups, or at least that's what I call them, right? And almost any given night, I have some food plots or green plots I could look at, and I could almost tell you to a T that I'm going to see, I'm going to see this doe and her 2 fawns. I'm going to see, 6 does because that's what my camera says is happening. And it does. It's almost the same over and over and over. So when I bring this whole concept up, I just mean to say, like, if there's a doe that has her core area close to that buck, and to your point, they're super socialized, even though that buck might live like a recluse most of the year, when it's time to breed, I think she goes and stands for him. I mean, I think, like, I almost would argue it's pre-programmed. She knows she's going to get bred at least by him first. And I know they say most does get bred by, $2 or $3. I believe that, but I would bet that first cycle, whether she's seeking him out or it's mutual or whatever, I think it happens more often than not. And I guess I've just never done any research like on, with even like deer farms and stuff, if that's the phenomenon they see. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know somebody that works in that community, and I should reach out and ask. That would be a great question. But I would bet, Curt, that you've hit on something right there, and I totally kind of believe in that concept, to be honest.
Well, and the other argument to be had, or to be added to the conversation would just be, if you're getting away, getting in and out, and not blowing out the super mature does, because God knows they're the ones that they'll be blowing at you at 300 yards, and you don't even know why, right? I mean, the wind switches they blow, a leaf falls in the food plot and they spook 20 yards. They're the most, they're more keen than the bucks. I'll guarantee you. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say is if you got something like that going on with those that are just that programmed to an area, you can just about bet dollars to donuts that she's going to pick out the most mature buck in the area. So it's almost like you hunt her, and by default you end up getting to hunt your big mature deer or buck.
Right. Yeah.
Don't know. Just a theory.
Yeah, absolutely, though. It's a great theory. So, that's why we have these conversations, so we can all learn and help others. So it's a great point for sure. But so, Curt, real quick, you end up getting the shot at 45 yards. I don't even think we got into, was that the morning or evening, and what happened after that?
It was an evening sit, and it was Sunday. I got in super early. And I don't know if it was just, you say you got a hunt or whatever, but I was very, very confident that I was going to see him that night. So I did. I climbed in, shortly after 1, and even though it was, 70-some degrees, I knew I was going to have high odds of seeing him. And sitting there, it was slow. It was slow probably till, if I said 4 o'clock, I had probably started seeing some deer, but interestingly enough, I seen a lot of deer that night. I'd probably seen 15 to 20 does and little bucks already start filtering out into the fields and just milling around. Very little, legit rut activity, just a lot of deer activity. And I had 2 little fawns come from my right earlier in the night. A couple of the first deer I seen actually came from my right, and I just thought it was interesting because there's basically no structure there. So they were either laying there when I walked in and snuck by them or they climbed up this hill to get to me. I'm not sure. But that exact same path they took when Turkeyfoot showed up, thankfully I heard a couple limbs snap or twigs break, whatever you want to say, and I started focusing my attention that way, and sure enough, it was him, and he walked out. So same phenomenon. I can't really explain it because I got to believe he was somewhere probably bedded right there when I walked in, and I would have had to walk right by him within, 50, 60 yards. And maybe my saving grace was the fact that it was windy. The wind was gusting even to 25 mile an hour that night, so my tree was all over the place, but caught him when he walked out, and like I said, that was a new set, Brandon, so I hadn't trimmed it out as fully as I would when I hang a set in the spring or whatever. But in either case, I'd ranged, there was a tuft of grass right on the edge of the cut cornfield, and I had ranged that probably 50 times that night, and I knew it was definitively 45 yards. And when he walked out, like I said, he was close. He was, 25, 30 yards. And then he started to angle away from me, and I had to let him to clear those branches. And then at 45, the second he stepped into that opening, I turned the air loose. And unfortunately, visually, I thought I hit him way back by his hip bone. And in hindsight, I was like, well, that's a horrible shot, but maybe I caught the femoral artery. But in either case, I just knew it wasn't an optimal shot, and I watched him dash down the hill and out of sight. So I gave it 35, 40 minutes, and then I climbed out and actually dropped off the ridge, like just to stay out of sight, just to stay away from him, and then went in the next day, started tracking him, and found his beds after about 300 yards. We actually ended up bumping him at like 11 o'clock the next morning. But visibly, we knew he was in pretty tough shape, so we backed out of there again, and then honestly, it turned into just searching for him based on direction. And lo and behold, my neighbor Jim, that had his core area, he got a picture of that deer about 40 minutes after we bumped him, and at that point we're running out of blood. I mean, I was kind of turning panic mode, but because of that picture, we knew where to go, and we ended up recovering him the following day. So
no kidding.
Sad. I mean, no one means to make a bad shot, but I'm glad we found him.
Yeah, was that picture, Curt, like a cell cam, so he got that information to you, and it was the good thing it wasn't like 2 weeks from now when he pulled an SD card?
It wasn't a cell cam, but given the situation, and obviously Jim was in the know on what had happened, I'd given him some intel on just directionally what the deer did when we jumped him up, and basically what the deer did was he side-hilled to get out of the valley that I've been talking about where he lived, and the second he topped out, it puts him right on the edge of one of Jim's little green fields. And then we kind of knew, because, I mean, it was like that deer topped out of that valley at 12:10. He was heading straight east. Once we had that deer was within 100 yards of that camera. So
no kidding.
Call it luck or good fate, but Jim went out and pulled his cards, and sure enough, there he was. And like I said, it basically led us right to him. So I think he went by that camera, probably on adrenaline still from getting bumped, and then, gosh, he only went another 100, 120 yards, and he actually walked into a standing cornfield and laid down, and that's where we recovered him, Brandon.
No kidding. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah,
they're resilient, man. They are resilient buggers.
Yeah, they are. They are. So from initially when you thought where you had hit him, what did you find out when you found him, Curt? Where actually was the shot, and was it still a little bit back? And I assume you must have hit some liver, and that's probably what gave him that gas tank for 300 or 400 yards, or however far he went.
Yeah, so like I said, visually for me, and I did have my Tacticam running on the bow, but in the heat of the moment, of course, I dropped my bow hand after it went off, and you see the arrow go, and even when I try to slow it down and review it, all you can see is my lighted knock, hitting the deer, and the deer immediately whirling. And in reality, what happened, Brandon, is he, at 45 yards, he whirled enough that my arrow went in through the ham and drove into him about 15 inches. So, I mean, I guess I don't want to joke about it, but people talk about a Texas heart shot. It was closer to a Texas heart shot than a femoral artery hit. Okay. And he had actually he bound off, and like I said, the blood trail was incredible. I could literally just walk it, and I had to tell myself to slow it down the next day when I was tracking him initially. I found the arrow at approximately 300 yards from where I shot it. He'd stopped and pulled it. But once he pulled that arrow, he bedded within about 30 yards of where I found the arrow.
Okay.
And for sure the night, that I left him overnight, just because like I said, I knew it was a marginal shot. I found 4 of his beds within 40 yards of each other, all on the creek. So exactly what you said. I mean, I suspected that I, maybe got into the guts, intestine, something, because he for sure was, he was hurting.
Bad.
And when we got him up, he basically couldn't even use his back right leg, so it obviously did a lot of damage. Whether it was nerve, muscle, I'm not even sure, tendon, whatever. But we knew he was in bad shape, and it wasn't a matter of, if he was going to make it or not. It actually turned into a matter of if we're going to find him or not. Because at that point, we weren't running on much blood. It was very, very spotty. But thankfully, because of a camera and having good neighbors, like I described, I mean, we put the pieces of the puzzle together relatively quick. So
yeah, that's great, and that's also a great tip for a lot of landowners and guys trying to manage land, is how important it is to have that relationship with a neighbor and just trying to be cordial. And I know yours is probably a very good relationship, but just at the minimalist, be cordial, and it could pay off for you in situations like this. So that's a great part of the story, Curt.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, you've heard the saying, "Your farm's only as good as your neighbor's," and I mean that is an absolute fact. So it helps, obviously, when you have like-minded neighbors. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing, or has the same goals. That certainly helps. But I mean, the same thing I'd mentioned when my headliner got shot. I took that kid that match set of horns that I picked up off my place, and he was just ecstatic about it. And then literally just yesterday, the other neighbor came into my office and gave me 2 sets of sheds from Turkeyfoot. So it's neat, and I hope someday I get to return that favor again. It's just like-minded people. If you're trying to grow and manage big deer, boy, it takes a village, unless you own a heck of a lot of land all contiguous.
Yeah, that's right. So well, real quick before we go, Curt, just tell us frame-wise what Turkeyfoot is and how he got his nickname.
So Turkeyfoot got his name because, and it's not quite as distinct this year, but on his both G2s, he always had some character. And last year, his G2 on the left side almost came to like a 3-prong crown-looking thing, I guess is what I'm going to call it. And I just remember seeing it, we got one angle one time, and I was like, gosh, it looks like he's got a little turkey foot off the top of the tine. So that's how he got his name. And the deer's got a really interesting frame, because Brandon, I would have bet you money going into the season that deer had, 25 to 27-inch beams. And the reason being is it's because how he carried it on his head, they looked incredibly long. I mean, I have some trail camera pictures where I'm like, this deer's got the longest beams of any deer I've ever hunted. And in reality, we get him on the ground, and his beams are short. They're like 22.5 inches long. I think one was 22 and maybe an eighth, and the other one was like 22.5. So I don't want to sound disappointed, because he still ran a tape well up, into that 170 range. But I guess I would have put the deer, probably closer to 180 on the hoof. And now looking back, I think it was because his horns looked huge proportional to his head. But I think it's because his head was tiny. He was just a little statured deer.
Yeah,
but
deer.
Yeah, obviously not upset. He's got everything you want. He had just short of 42 inches of total mass. Gosh, I don't remember how many times, hit 10 inches, but if I told you 3 or 4 or 10 or better.
Wow.
Pretty average as far as spread. I think he was 19 or 19.5. He just a very unique, like almost every feature on his rack is different. It's either bladed, it's got wavy characteristics. He's just a weird shaped deer, I guess, and probably the most unique one I've ever taken. So
yeah, he's got a ton of character in that, and the mass measurement's unreal too. That's a lot of mass. So I mean, he just carries everything really well, and like I said, I don't even know how to explain it, but just such a unique frame, and obviously a deer that man, it's super unique, and like you said, you'll probably never shoot another one like it.
Well, and it's a little tough to tell in some of the pictures, but if you look at the pictures, Brandon, he has exceptional brow tines. I think one was 6 and one was 7, and they both have splits, and they're substantial splits, like 3-4 inch splits off a brow. So that's kind of neat too. If you actually you ever get to Iowa and get your hands on this deer, I think you would agree that his brow tines are about as cool as I've ever seen, because he's literally matching splits, and in both cases they're like almost like I think when I mount them, I'm even going to bend an arrow or something just to get it so I can set it down in those splits on his brows, because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's something I noticed in the pictures, and it's hard to tell from the pictures exactly what the perception or depth is, but that's maybe one of the most unique features on that deer, which is really awesome.
Yeah, and it's one of the deals you almost, like, I'm not going to say, this is going to sound weird when I say this, but, like, he's one of those deer, in a picture, you turn him one way, you wouldn't bat an eye at him. You turn him another way, you'd think he's a 180-inch deer. And like I said, he ran a tape right to 170, which was actually smaller than I thought. But it's hard to be disappointed with just score when your number one goal is age structure and managing the herd that way. So yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm disappointed at all. I was just shocked. When it came time to pull a tape on his beams, I thought for sure they were going to be like 25 plus inches, and like I said, they were well short of that. So
yeah, still unique and nothing to shake a stick at. That's one of the coolest bucks I've ever seen, and again, on your home property, so I couldn't be more happy for you, Curt. And I know you're tagged down and you're kind of bummed, but man, I guess you got a lot of things to look forward to for next year. Like you just stacked up with good solid deer, a good age group, and just kudos to all the work you and your neighbor put in. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we're still excited. I mean, the cool thing is when your ultimate goal of age structure is, you don't have to rebuild, we reload, whatever you want to call it, but the crop of 3 and 4 year olds that we're seeing has us incredibly excited for the future. So you take a deer like that out of the herd dynamics, somebody's going to step in and become that guy, and it's right. Now I'm anxious to see who is that, who's next. So
yeah, excited for new challenges and new relationships, so to speak, on the property, which is a lot of fun. But man, I don't know what else to say, man. Congrats, Curt. You've had a heck of a season, and excited that you could share that story with us today on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome, man, and I thank you. I mean, like I said, it's I think a lot of your listeners are probably just like us, Brandon, but I mean, when it is basically your lifestyle, some guys say, well, hunting's my passion, and I'm like, really, hunting's our lifestyle. I mean, it's 24/7, 365. I guarantee a day doesn't go by when I'm not thinking about something deer related or, what we need to be doing to be ready for deer season, but exciting, and appreciate you having me on, and hopefully somebody can take some of this or whatever and help them be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about it, Curt, like you said, guys, for like us, those guys are listening to the podcast, and this story and everything just happened legitimately was in real time. So guys are going to get this information, and this wasn't a deer Curt killed 5 years ago. This just happened for Curt. So we're literally getting this out semi-live, and this is the kind of stuff that really helps hunters and guys trying to take that next step. So again, Curt, man, thanks for taking part, man. I appreciate it, and can't wait till we do it again, like always.
And Brandon, like I said, I'd be remiss not to mention all three of the big animals I got this year, starting with my mule deer in September, were with a prototype 2021 expedition. And I'm telling you, I am so absolutely stoked to get these things out in the market. We're going to launch on January 7th, and mark my words, we are about to change the archery industry.
Man, I'm super excited, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit, but obviously, and I know we'll get together and kind of go over the lineup, when you guys are ready to do that. But super excited about that, and I'm excited to hear that you got a full hunting season in with those new prototypes. And dude, I'm super excited. As me and you just talked, man. I smoked a great Michigan buck yesterday morning with my MX-16, and I've never been so happy to shoot such a good bow. And, you know, I told you before offline, Curt, it kind of gave me new passion, fire again, where I wasn't just going out to shoot again. I was going out with this expedition and having fun again and enjoying those reps. And if you guys improved on that, man, I'm super stoked and can't wait to talk about it.
You'll be everyone's going to be very pleasantly surprised on the direction Expedition's going. We're incredibly excited, and I look forward to sharing that news with you here pretty sudden, because like I said, January 7th, launch day, you guys are going to start seeing us put some teaser stuff out. You know, we're going to start hinting around on what we got coming, and you'll start seeing that stuff here literally in just the next couple weeks. So
awesome, man. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Super excited. So be looking for that stuff from Expedition. And Curt, man, let me know. We'll rock out the 2021 lineup.
Right on, man. Congrats on your buck, Brandon. Take care of yourself.
All right, you too. Thanks, Curt. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And as always, make sure if you get the chance to check out the Hunt Stand. If you have not yet downloaded the Hunt Stand app, which is available iOS and Android, and use the code TAKEAIM10 for a special discount. See you guys again next week.